What happens when you get two children's authors together who don't know each other? Find out today. Hey everybody, I'm Scott Patton. He's Chaffee-Thanh. We're your co-hosts on Books Cafe, sponsored by 3ebooks.net. And I'm really excited because I've never had two guests on this show in the last, it's been over a year, and I've only ever had one guest. Now, of course, I have a co-host and a guest, and that is really, it's really, really exciting. Of course, all that really means, everybody, is that I'm lazy because I get Chaffee to ask all the questions and I take all the glory. Right, Chaffee?
Well, sure, Scott.
So, Chaffee, you have 6 published books, children's books. You have a number of non-fiction and maybe fiction adult books, business books. And so that's one of the reasons that I was so excited to have our guest on today, because we were talking last week, and he's a copywriter. He's a business strategist. He's got an amazing business mind. I never had any idea that he had wrote a children's book. So as soon as I found out, I said, "What are you doing on Wednesday at 5:30 Eastern?" And he said, "Nothing." And then I said, "Great, get your calendar out, mark it, because you're going to be on a live stream with my buddy Chaffee, and we're going to talk about children's books." So with that, let me add Tony Stark Policci to the show. Hey, Tony, how are you doing?
Hey, Scott, I'm great. How are you?
Good, good. So I don't actually know where to start. Like, why did you write a children's book, Tony?
Well, I don't know that I put that much thought into it, but first of all, hi, Chaffee. It's so nice to meet you. It's so great to be here. And
nice to meet you, Tony.
Yeah, I heard your chatter at the beginning of the show, and I was just laughing when you said I had nothing to do on Wednesdays. I was like, gosh, when have I had nothing to do? But I'm so delighted to be here today. But
I guess what I should have said is that your calendar didn't have anything specific that you had to do, so that I could fill it up.
That's right. Yes. So my mother was actually an author. She wrote academic books on how to teach children to read by the phonetic method, which was, like all the rage 50 something years ago. Right. And so I've always had kind of a panache, I guess, for writing, but the children's book idea kind of just organically happened. So this was in 2010, and my boy's mother, my ex-wife, she had a lot of health issues, and unfortunately, that made her unable to really take part in a lot of the parenting. So my boys and I spent a lot of time together. And this one particular day, there was a school. Do you want me to go into the story now, or just how I came up with the idea?
Yeah. Come.
So the school that they went to was just around the corner from our house, and I'm out cleaning the garage, and my son and a couple of his friends come running back to me, and they're like, "Dad, there's fish on the football field." And I was like, "What?"
Is that a Dr. Seuss title?
Right? It could be, And so we had a little adventure around all of this, and later on, I just sat with my son Devin, and I said, "Son, wouldn't it be kind of neat if we just wrote this down and turned it into a story?" I said, "I bet other kids would like to hear about this." So that's what we did, and then I sat on it, I got busy with work, and I'll take care of that next month, next week, On his 21st birthday, he was 10 at the time, is when I decided I was going to publish it.
Wow.
it's really funny because I was thinking, like, what am I going to get him for his 21st birthday? I mean, I took him skydiving when he was 19. I didn't want to send him to Vegas to get him, that's where everybody goes at 21, but that's the last place I want to send my kid and endorse that behavior. But I said, I'm going to publish this book because we wrote it. He forgot all about it. And so that's how it came up. Now, part of the story is that once we did this, I started thinking, I was like, wouldn't it be cool to just write all the stories of what I've done with my sons and call them Adventures with Dad? So this one is the first in a forthcoming series of all the true life things that my boys and I have done together. And rather than doing them for older kids, I'm kind of doing them for the younger market with, their 32-page picture book format. So
that's fantastic. Oh, Scott's muted.
That is awesome. Whereas there's a thunderstorm going on right now, so I'm trying to make sure that the thunder isn't drowning out either of you two as you talk.
Hey, Tony, quick question.
Yes,
you got the book in front of you, right? And you want to hold that up and show everyone?
I do. This is it.
So is it a picture book, or that's a heavy duty fancy book?
It's a hard book, a hardcover book, not a hard book. And there's full color illustrations. All of the pages are full color. And see, these are the illustrations are actually drawn from childhood pictures of my sons and his friends. So
nice.
I gave one to every family whose kids are featured, and there's an illustration of me, kind of looks like me. But yeah, so the and the boy's mother there, we didn't feature her face, but we got the back of her head. And so yeah, the book it's got the actual school. I tried to make it as true to life as possible, and I feel really pleased with the way that it turned out.
Excellent job.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So that's a lot more detailed than my kids' books. Mine are more of the what we call picture books, right? So with just a couple lines on each page, and really it's the pictures. And yours is actually an actual story with a lot of content and detailed versus just one or two liners here or there.
Yeah, well, I think the reason that it took me so long to publish it, Chaffee, wasn't I exaggerated a little bit when I said I stuck it on the shelf and got busy. That isn't exactly the case. A few months after we wrote it, I thought, I really would like to publish this. I don't remember the whole process but I started seeking an artist. And, I had one person they contracted to do it. And then 2 months later, I got nothing, no sketches, and I've got a deposit, and I'm like, I'm really sorry, but I've decided to take a job at Disney. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. I went through a half a dozen different artists over a couple year period. And, this wasn't like a full-time job for me. This was kind of a side project that I wanted to do kind of as a cool thing. So, but finally, this is the funniest thing. What actually got me over the edge was I have a close friend who decided he wanted to publish a children's book for his grandson. And as you probably know, I didn't know this, but he educated me about it. There's a lot of folks doing, children's books with just a few pages, right? 4 or 5 pages. And
I didn't know that.
Oh, I didn't know that either. Mine's like 30 pages.
Yeah, they're doing them and then selling them, putting them on Amazon just as a digital book. So,
Tony, are they putting it on Amazon expecting to sell it?
They are selling them, yes.
They are. I mean, they're called short books. I've kind of heard of them. Only I didn't know they were children's books that they're doing. I mean, it's hard to really convey a story in 4 or 5 pages unless it's text, right?
Right.
And I'm assuming there's images on here if it's for children.
Yes. Yeah. They're full color illustrations, but only a few pages. I think Robert's book is maybe 6 pages, 6 or 7 pages.
Oh wow!
And it's called something with Pop-Up, but it just and I looked at those and I thought, my gosh, where did you get those done? And he went online and he hired somebody online on one of the sites where you can hire out work. And I thought, oh my gosh, I use that all the time in my business. Let me go there and look.
We call that a blinding flash of the obvious, right?
Exactly. Yes. I really had that too after the fact. I was like, why? How could I not have thought of this?
Right.
At least in the last 4 years. I mean, maybe 8 years ago, no, but I use this on a regular basis, this service. And now, sadly, the first set of illustrations that came back, I liked them, but as I looked at them, I thought, there was a couple things with the drawings that I thought were going to cause problems. And so I went back to find the artist and he was gone. He was no longer even part of the organization. I tried to track him down. They couldn't find him. But fortunately I had someone else that I was doing who had done work for me, who'd drawn all my superhero renderings for my business. And I said, can you edit this? She's like, sure. I'm like, cool. So yeah. Anyway,
magic.
That's how that all worked out.
Scott, do we can share resources and stuff on this?
Absolutely.
All right. So I don't know who you used, Tony. Only I had to go through several illustrators as well because that was one of the biggest challenges with the kids' books. And so we came up. Here's my kids' books. As you can see, it's smaller than yours, obviously, and it's very, like I said, a few sentences on each page, and there's the illustrations. And we went through probably 3 or 4 illustrators before we ended up coming up with one that we use even today. And we went through a site called Upwork.com. And with Upwork, you can place an order of what kind of job you're looking for and how much you're willing to pay, or just what job you're willing to look for and the price range. And then the artists or the people that are on there that are willing to do the work will bid about how much can bid on that project, and then you just go through and you choose a few. So we went through a handful of them and came up with one, and it's worked out really well. She's done most of our books. She picked up after a couple artists that we went through that just didn't work out. Only we have one now that does pretty much all our books for us. So
that seems to be something that happens all the time, regardless whether it's artists or other services, where it just seems like you have to go through a few people before you find the right one, and then they're like worth their weight in gold, and you never want them to go away.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel about this first guy. I wish I had some other way to contact him, because he was a delight to work with. And also, your book looks great, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, the reason that probably what took me so long in this was I had this very specific vision for it when I first came up with the idea. I really wanted it to be, I wanted to create something that was going to be kind of a keepsake for my kids and for their friends. So from as far back as I can remember, I felt like I really had to have true to life illustrations. I realized going forward that makes things much more difficult, because.
Well, if it makes you feel better, my son, when my son was born, I came up with an idea for a book, and I'm a success coach. Is one of the things I do is coaching, and so I came up with a book called "Baby Steps to Success: What My 8-Month-Old Child Taught Me About Success," and it was just lessons about success.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't released that book yet, and he's 13 now. So it makes it feel any better. I took down the notes. I took down, the points that I wanted to convey. I started to write down the outline, and then, you're a dad, you get busy and with work. So I never finished that book. So it's still on my list of books to write.
I definitely understand. Yeah.
So don't feel too bad that you finally got yours published, because mine still isn't.
You'll get
in the front when they have the dedication, it'll be dedicated to my grandson.
That's right.
Let's hope not. My goodness. Yeah. The resource that I used was I went to Fiverr.com.
Okay.
Fiverr.
Yeah. And I've used Upwork in the past too. So that just happened to go with Fiverr. And
we started with Fiverr actually, and that didn't work out for us. So then we switched over to Upwork. So
Well, maybe I'll investigate that for the next one.
And I don't know the name of it, but I've heard of like crowdsourcing sites where people will say, listen, I need to have a logo. And then you just put it there. And then like there'll be 200 people will give you their logo idea for you.
Oh.
And then you pick that one and then you pay that person. Right. So it's really kind of an interesting way of doing it. So it's kind of like, well, I'm going to do a child's. I don't know if they would do this or not. I just know about it for logos, but there's all sorts of different things that people they'll give you an example of it, and then you hire that person.
So here's an idea that I haven't done yet, although I've seen other people do it. Is I forgot what it's called, Kickstarter. So if you go to a Kickstarter site and say you're going to write a specific book and what it's going to cost and everything, and then you offer maybe a discount on the purchase of the book when it's published and all that kind of stuff, you can actually raise money to write and publish your book. So I've seen some authors do that. I haven't, like I said, done that myself. That's an option if you're looking to get published and you're short on funds and you need an illustrator and you need all this kind of stuff. Maybe start a Kickstarter fund and see if you can write enough a good enough story or reason for people to invest in you. Then they will, and I've seen some authors be able to do that.
Yeah,
I really dislike Kickstarter because starting about 8 months ago, I started buying stuff on there, and I'm like, and of course, it takes like 6 months, 8 months before you actually. This is a Kickstarter shirt that I'm wearing underneath my other shirt, but they're just like they have a story. They're really cool. Like I'm getting a pair of shoes that are made from ground coffee.
Wow.
So evidently, like this ground coffee, it's after they've made the coffee, the grind.
So you don't really hate them, Scott.
They've cost me a small fortune, right? And being in Ecuador, it gets caught up in customs or whatever. And I have like 4 boxes waiting at a friend's of mine in Bogota, Colombia, because I'm going there in 2 weeks. And he said, look, I got this box. He said, this one's really light. I go, oh, I'm getting a camera that has a little hook on it. And it goes down to the middle of your screen. And it's like about this, like it's just really, really small.
I've seen that.
Yeah. It's like a center cam, it's called. And it goes like well, I have to point here. It goes like right there on my screen, and you can see everything around, and it kind of pops up, and it's like it's got a microphone, a camera, everything else, and I'll be able, instead of looking like this, so I'm not really, that's how I have to look like I'm looking at you instead of looking at you guys who are over here. I'll be like right in the. Anyway,
that's brilliant.
Yeah. So once you get hooked, like they send you these emails, and of course it's like, what about this and what about that? And you go, oh, that is so cool. And then when you're on the site, there's we've got these things over here and those things over there, and
Yeah, so
I don't
make
know.
sure your story is really good, so you keep attention on your Kickstarter. Can I share like my little Kickstarter trophy with you guys real quick?
Oh, he's got a Kickstarter trophy. How'd he get that?
Well, we're gonna find out in a minute.
I call it my trophy. You see this right here?
Yes.
This is called a coin, and I went on Kickstarter and purchased this. It's not even open. Yeah, I haven't even opened it. Well, what it is, it's a credit card that you can store all your other credit card numbers in.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, and by the time I actually got it, like within a couple months of getting it, the technology was obsolete. So I bought 2 of these for like $150 each, and this one's unopened. So I'm hoping that maybe someday
you got to stick with the shirts and the coffee shoes, Tony.
Yeah, stuff you can actually wear. Because what am I gonna do with this? It's a paperweight.
No. What you do, leave it unopened, put it in the attic with all the other stuff, and then in about 50 years, that is going to be worth a fortune.
That's the time capsule. Stick it in the time capsule.
I'll put it right next to my unopened 60 gig iPod. Yeah, because I have one of those too. The first 60 gig iPod that held like 1,000 songs and did video.
Yeah.
I got a Sony Walkman. What are you talking about?
I got one of those too, but mine's not unopened. So
That's true.
is your Sony
you
Walkman
have it unopened?
No, it's opened.
Oh.
It's used, opened and used.
Yeah, I
Well,
found
that's going to be
that in
worth
my
a
drawer.
fortune
when I
in about 20 years.
used to love my Sony Walkman. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Sony Walk. So
Anyway, let's redirect.
In addition to being children's authors, you guys are also very, very good at business. And so I want to. We brought up the Walkman. Am I the only person to be really, really disappointed that Sony dropped the ball on music, walkable music? They came out with the Walkman. I think they were first. If they weren't first, they were the biggest. I had like 6 different, like every couple of years they'd come out, I'd buy a new one, right? I had the compact disc one. And then the iPod came out, and I switched over to the iPod. And I think I probably had 4 of the 8 versions of the iPod that came out, and then the Walkman disappeared. And so any lessons from that? Anything? I mean, I know we're going totally on a different topic and a tangent here, but this is my show. I'm the producer. I can do whatever I want. So Tony, start with you. Okay. So we had the Walkman. It was Sony. It was huge. And then it like your Kickstarter product became obsolete. What do you think?
Well, I because I don't know the real story, I can only speculate as to what happened. But I think when you become a giant in a market, there's a tendency to feel like nobody can touch you, right? Or that we've been doing this for so long that there's nobody can catch up with us. I remember the story of the Switch watchmakers where that kind of happened. They refused to change with technology, and pretty soon, that became obsolete. I mean, the same thing with, cameras, right? Film cameras. Now, some of those things are coming back from a nostalgic standpoint, but my judgment is that what happened with Sony was they just weren't paying attention to innovation and technology and trying to stay ahead of it. They're 20 years ago, maybe even 30, you could plan, you could research, you could execute. But today, the market demands a lot more. You have to predict. You have to like future cast and try and figure out where are things going in 5 years and start working on that now. Because if you don't, you're going to get left behind. That's just what I've noticed.
Awesome. Before Chaffee chimes in with his opinion, we have a couple comments from the Peanut Gallery. Someone that who's wondering, like, who's this Tony guy? Chaffee, we both know Rob, just so you know. And he says, I still have a beta VCR, which was made by Sony. And I know the story on the beta VCR. Sony kept the technology, and the technology was superior. But the VHS people, whoever figured that out, they basically open sourced it. Says anyone that wants to make it, go for it, whatever. It was either very little licensing or none. And it just, everybody made they wouldn't license the Sony beta because it was too expensive. And then it didn't matter that it was worse quality. If you had a choice between a $500 beta and a $200 VHS or whatever it was, then they did that.
Well,
so thank you very much.
That's the same thing that happened with Apple and Microsoft, right? I mean, why Apple almost went out of business in the 80s is they had a superior product in the Apple Macintosh, and Microsoft decided to license their Windows software to everybody and took over the market, even though the Apple product was superior.
Right.
So
yeah. So it's a combination of price. Now, what's interesting with Sony is I worked for the Sony store in Canada for 3 months before they fired me. That's when I discovered that I really was unemployable, because I didn't, at that point, I kept telling them what idiots they were. But here's I'll never forget this. The president of the company of Canada, Sony Canada, and I hope they don't sue me if they hear this, but he gets in front of all of the store managers, like 200 of them, or 100, I forget how many there were. These were little stores that they would have in the malls with only Sony products, right? And there would be products that they would come out with that, you know, nobody, Best Buy wouldn't touch it, right? But they would put it in the Sony store, and then they'd have second version, third version. And eventually it would get to the point where Best Buy would say, oh yeah, like we'll buy 1,000 of these or 1,000,000. But the product never would have made it if the Sony store hadn't have kept it going, right? It would have just died, because where are you going to sell it if none of the big boxes are going to sell it? And so anyway, he gets up and he says, listen, I'm not asking and they're struggling. The little stores are obviously struggling. He says, I'm not going to ask Sony to finance us or give us any more money. We have to stand on our own 2 feet. And I thought, you've got this massive multinational company that is just oozing dollars, and you want to grow at the speed that your cash flow in these piddly little stores is going to create. Are you insane? And 2 years later, they were all closed. So, you know, it's like this. I think he said that because everyone was wondering why Sony wasn't putting money into it. And Sony looked at Canada Sony and said, that's a stupid investment. And he didn't want to admit it. But anyway, getting back to the question of the iPod and the Walkman, Chaffee, what's your take on it?
Well, you know, I worked in the IT industry for over 11 years, and technology in general just moves at the speed of light or faster. I mean, it's ridiculous. So just like Tony said, if you're not paying attention and you have a technology product, that technology, I forgot what the law is. There's a law that says that I think Intel came out with it, that it takes 18 months for technology to double its speed or something like that. Again, if you're not paying attention, the technology is obsolete. It's ridiculous what's happening. So when you get to a certain size, it's more difficult to pay attention to what's happening, especially if one, you're not on top of it, and two, your people aren't conveying that message to you in a timely manner.
Right.
And so, you know, it's you know, turning a big ship versus turning a little boat. And
so from an organizational perspective, if you have a president that thinks they know everything, and if you give them bad news, yell and scream, you're probably not going to be telling them that, you know, CDs are a little iffy because, you know, MP3s are coming and digital.
Well, the other thing too is there's a lot of managers or CEOs or you know, executives that are looking at what's happening today. And if you interview all the super successful, you know, CEOs, the like Jeff Bezos, they're not looking at what's happening today or even 5 years from now. They're looking at what's happening 20, 30 years in the future. And that's kind of what you have to do if you're on top of a technology company that the rate of technology changes so fast. And so, you know, Sony wasn't doing that. They were just looking at see what's happening, right? Not what will happen. So
yeah, and they used to make TVs too that were top of the line. And when I go into Best Buy, I never see a Sony. Of course, I'm not particularly looking either, but you see a whole bunch of other brands I'd never heard of before. Cool. All right. So we should get back to talking about children's books. Tony, are you going to come out with another book?
I am. I have a list of 12 or 15 different titles and topics. Well, at least topics. A couple of those titles are developed. And one of them is called A Day in the Rainforest. And that's about when my boys and I were in Maui, and we were driving up the highway, and we found this. It was just a lush jungle-looking area with huge trees, and we went and ran around there. And like I don't think I've seen trees that big in my entire life.
Wow, that sounds awesome.
Redwoods in California, they were enormous. And yeah, so my vision going forward with the rest of the books is my next one. I want my older son to help me with, even though he's 22.
Nice.
We're going to go back. I want him to be a co-author on these. And my goal is that I leave a legacy for my boys. You know, after I'm gone, they've got books that they wrote with me that they can share with their kids. But the short answer to your question is yes.
And you could be creating a family tradition, right? Because they'll get married, they have sons or daughters, and they'll say, you know what, it was so fun writing these books with my dad. I'm going to do that with you.
That's true.
How beautiful is that?
I sure hope that they would feel that way. That would be cool.
Tony, what from a consumer standpoint, right? I mean, you're writing these books as kind of memoirs with you and your sons. From a consumer standpoint, if I buy your book, what am I going to get from it? Is it just I'm reading a fun story? Is it an adventure story? Is there a lesson behind it? Or, am I just reading some memories that might bring a smile to my face?
Well, I try to instill a lesson or a moral in I tried to do that in Fishing on the Football Field. So the summary is that it starts with Devin waking up and he's frustrated because he's got a day off. It's a Saturday and he has absolutely no plans. And I get like that too. It's almost like he's got my genes where like, I don't want to waste time. Time is valuable. I want to make the most of it. And so he really expected that he was going to have a boring day, and it turned out to be a lifelong memory. So there's a little, piece at the ending where I kind of wrap that up and put a meaning into the story. But along with it, what I'm trying to weave in for the consumer, for the reader, is a sense of excitement. I want to talk about unusual things. There are plenty of children's books out there that talk about everyday stuff, and that's great. Kids are enthralled by what I believe adults would consider mediocre or boring. But I'm trying to bring just a little bit more of excitement, and even turning maybe everyday experiences into an adventure. So, for example, in this book, the reason there were fish on the football field was because the field was irrigated. And that's how on some of the county properties here where I live in Arizona, we've got state and then there's county, and those little islands, they have irrigation rather than, like water that comes through a sprinkler. So it comes out of a canal and then it's flooded onto the land. So if fish get into that water and they get maybe there's a hole or something in the grates, that's how the fish got on there. So that in and of itself is not really, a crazy thing to happen, but it's certainly unusual. And, what we
everyone
did,
that sees it would stop and say, like, where did these fish come from?
yeah. And so, what we did because of finding the fish, is kind of what I try to wrap into. Like we saved them and, we rehomed them. So
I was thinking dinner.
Well, yeah, most of them were carp. So,
okay.
I've got a great carp recipe if you guys ever want it. You put it on a piece of pine, you cook it for 2.5 hours, and take it out, throw away the fish, and eat the board. But all my stories, I'm trying to weave in a bit of adventure, showing bonding and fun times with the boys, my boys and myself, and then some kind of a little life lesson or just a heartwarming takeaway that you can get from
what age range would you say your books are geared towards?
I'm going to say probably 4 to 10, 4 to 12. That was the hardest part for me, is trying to figure out the age range. It was like, gosh, I think a child, you're at 12, you might be pushing, like caring about a picture book. But are you pushing it at 10 with all of the media and everything that is now accessible to young kids, right? But I think, up to 3rd and 4th grade is a pretty safe bet.
Awesome.
Cool.
What about yours?
Well, my book is, I started writing my book when the idea came when my son was about 8 years old. He was in 2nd grade. And so the book is about a 2nd grader. So, that's, what's great about a lot of these books, and you brought it up, you bring it up too, is that, you know, they're based upon real life. They're based upon what happens to you in everyday life. And so I know there's some fantastic people that come up with these great ideas and everything like that. Only if you just look and see what's going on around you, I mean, there's stories every single day.
Right.
And so my son was, like I said, he was about 8 years old when we started coming up with these ideas. He was in second grade, and we're like, let's write some lessons. And again, it goes back to that book idea that I had, you know, 13 years ago or 12 years ago, which is what am I learning from my son? Or at this point, what is my son learning? And can I write some books and lessons that would be appropriate for my son to read so that he can overcome those challenges? One of them, we have a book on being brave. I forget the title. It's one of the 12, 13 books we have. Only it's about being brave and overcoming some fears. And that one is all about him learning to get off training wheels and learning how to ride a bike. And so my son actually had training wheels on his bike, and he just didn't want to get rid of them. And so I kept encouraging him to get on the bike and ride it and take the training wheels off. And he was like, no, I don't want to. And you know, as a parent, you can kind of see that he was scared, only he wasn't admitting it. It was just like, oh, you know, I just don't want to do it. Like, oh, it's okay. Don't worry about it. And so, you know, in the book, it's that story of how he overcame that, how all his friends were doing it and they helped him. And so he had to overcome that. And once he overcame it, it was like the best thing since sliced bread, being able to ride a bike with his friends and going through the neighborhood and everything. And so that story, you know, it's again, based upon real life of what happened with my son. And that's how we came up with that little story there.
Yeah. And I think that's a great format because we love stories. We've been telling stories since we could communicate with each other. Right. And, you know, parables are great ways to teach lessons. And, I mean, even as an adult, if you told me the training story or the training wheel story, I would get it. Like, you know, I mean, that really could apply to any age, but I think being able to instill those kinds of lessons into a young person's way of thinking and mind is really paramount. You know, it saves a lot of years of therapy and unfortunately maybe coaching for some because they get their thinking right to begin with, you know. So good for you. That's awesome.
All right, we're coming towards the end, and Tony, thank you. Like this has been really fun and really interesting, and I'm going to ask you both for a tip for new authors. What that is right after this. So, Tony, you're the guest, so you get to go second. This gives you more time to think. And I love putting Chaffee on the spot, as he knows. So,
all the time.
Chaffee, what is a tip for a new author, particularly one that's thinking about children's books?
So my tip is don't be like Tony and I. Which is don't wait 10 years. If you have this idea of writing a book, don't wait 10 years or more to get that published. Write it down. The resources are available on the internet and through podcasts like this. We share resources that you can use to get your idea down and to get it out there and to get it out there sooner. So everything that you need is available. You just have to ask questions and get that story down and share it with as many people as you can. So if you got an idea, write it down and get moving on it, because it's really not that hard once you start diving in and getting it done.
Awesome.
That's great. Great tips. You know, I have to echo that, but I want to come up with something that's like an additional. Perfectionism, I think, is what got in the way of me publishing this book. I had a vision for how I wanted to get it done. And because I ran into obstacle after obstacle after obstacle with coming up with the illustrator, it got shelved and for all intents and purposes, just forgotten about and ignored. So do not allow perfectionism to get in your way. So the hardest part, I think, for everybody is to just start writing. And Chaffee already covered that, do it. And if you have trouble actually writing, if you have difficulty thinking, then tell the story, talk into something, use your app, upload it to, otter.ai and transcribe it. The first book that I wrote, my friend interviewed me over the phone. We paid a transcriber and, that I could go edit it. So that's a real simple tip. But if you're stuck on something, there are so many resources. Literally, you can go and search on YouTube or, I guess reach out to Chaffee. And there are so many resources where you can just ask and find what you need. There's no reason to be stuck anymore. So I don't know if I gave a tip in there or not. Sometimes I'm so ADD, I forget what I say.
Yeah, you did. Don't get stuck.
Don't let perfectionism, get in the way. Just, yeah.
Awesome.
Just to tag on to that, Tony, I know that was your tip. And, get the first book out there. It might not be perfect. It might not be exactly what you envisioned. And getting it out there is such a huge accomplishment that the second one and the third one and the fourth one becomes so much easier. And they get better and better and better each time. So just get it out there and start sharing with people. And like I said, you'll come up with more and more stories as it goes, and it becomes fun. So
that is really great advice, Chaffee. Can I add something to that?
You bet.
But just an example, like when the book that I mentioned before that my friend helped me record, Rob Onspach, who was on her earlier, actually a friend of mine, like he came to me for marketing help decades ago, and now he's a marketing genius. And he came to me and said, "We're going to publish your book." Well, I already published in e-format, but I never had it in like printable format. So he helped me get that thing together and launch it. Well, guess what? I sent a unproofed copy in to Amazon and we published it. And when it came out, my wife was reading it and Rob pushed it to Amazon bestseller. Okay. Guy's brilliant. But when my wife's reading through it, like she's one page in, she's like, "Oh my gosh, look at this." And she shows me this proofing error. And I was like, "Oh, wow. How did I miss that?" She's another one. I'm like, "Oh no." I said, "Sweetheart, go through the whole book, find every error." She literally used a whole pad of Post-it notes marking errors. Well, I got so embarrassed and frustrated that I went and I revised the whole book. I increased it by about 30 pages. I made it a much better product, and then I uploaded it. But there's a whole host of people out there that have the incorrect version with all these proofing errors in it. And it's a book on copywriting, for goodness sakes.
And it's in 20 years, they will be collector items.
Yeah, and I got a stack of them here at the house that I saved. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
That's a good thing though, because a couple things. First of all, it's if people complain about errors in your book, it tells you that they're reading it. Right. So that's the first thing. If there's no complaints and there's a ton of errors, that means no one's reading it. All right. So that's the first thing, is that people are reading it. And the second thing is that with today's technology, you can upload and create a second revision and relaunch it. And then, update it, add content to it. And then you can do a third revision and add it and update it and everything. So you can have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 revisions. And I've seen some books do that. And each time it's like a brand new book, because you're making it better and better each and every time. So just get it out there is the key thing. Yeah.
And I think what you talked about, Tony, is a really good example of human nature, right? We get it out. Oh, thank God that's done. And then all of a sudden it's, well, like, look at this and look at this and look at this. And you go, and then, our pride and our desire to improve, you didn't just fix the spelling or grammatical errors. You ended up really diving into the book and adding 30 more pages, which is not insignificant, right?
Right.
And so I think but you would never have done that if it wasn't published.
Right.
If she said, "Oh, you got a couple of grammatical errors, go fix it." You go, "Okay, I'll do that like tomorrow." And then, 3,000 tomorrows later, it's still sitting there. And hundreds, if not thousands and tens of thousands of people are missing out on your wisdom that you're expressing in your book, because you're just letting it sit there because of, some little mistake that really doesn't matter.
Right. So whoever's listening to this, you got a book in you, you can do it. Get it out there. You can do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me today. It's been an awesome show. I really enjoyed it. And so has our thousands and thousands of viewers and Rob. So with that, Tony, thank you for coming on. Chaffee, thank you for being my co-host. Really appreciate
Absolutely.
you both.
It was
Thank you,
great
guys.
talking with you, Tony.
Great talking with you too. Thank you so much for having me on.
And thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you next Wednesday at 5:30 Eastern, 2:30 Pacific. This has been Books Cafe, sponsored by free-ebooks.net.